Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Everything HR podcast. I'm your host, Manuel, founder and CEO of OmniHR. Today, Rebecca and I are going to be discussing a little bit of a touchy subject right now: diversity, equity, and inclusion, the 50-50 gender ratio rule, blind recruiting, and a lot more. Beck, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Glad to be on again. Thank you for having me as well, as always.
For sure, for sure. So, I mean, we just starting off, diversity, equity, and inclusion, kind of the way that it works, we have different backgrounds,
Viewpoints,
right?
yeah.
Different ethnicities. And because of that, our career paths and the way that we've kind of experienced things has been a little bit different. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of your take on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think for starters, the most obvious one is that you're male, I'm female.
Okay.
From the drop, most obvious, that is the easiest identification when it comes to our diversity between each other. Background on it, I have noticed it. I've dealt with it. It is what it is. I don't know if we want to rip the band-aid off on this one or ease into it slowly, but it's always going to be around. Everybody wants to celebrate diversity, but at the same time, everyone wants to have the to be treated equally. It's one or the other.
Mm,
And while usually, you know how I am, I want to find that healthy medium. For this one, I just can't see it
okay.
because so long as there are differences, and there's always going to be differences among the human population, this is something that is I can't see 100% equality happening.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's kind of define it, right? So diversity, equity, inclusion, what it means, especially like in the workplace, is it's basically just a framework. It's an idea that focuses on recognizing people based off their racial, sexual, gender, religious, and kind of their socioeconomic groups as well. So anything that you could like hyper focus on to make someone different, that is what it's about. So no matter what the background is, if you're kind of different from another person, which obviously, like you said, no one is a carbon copy of someone else. Even your own kids are different because they have two different parents. So
Twins, triplets,
yeah,
all
like
different.
they're all still different. The mindset's different, things like that. So it's a very, very touchy subject. Like you said, maybe it's best to rip the band-aid off. Maybe we ease into it 100%. And it really just comes down to what's the line. And in my opinion, what that really means is what's the goal? Is the goal to be 50-50 hiring? So making it a metric of success focused on we're hiring 50% men and 50% women. In my opinion, that's not the best way. You don't want a metric to focus on who it is that you're hiring because that is literally countering the goal of what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
Should be to instead build people up when they start so that way they understand how they can improve, how they can grow themselves to then be the best applicant. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, at least as a manager, as a leader. You're looking for the best person, right? No matter who it is, no matter the background, the education, their socioeconomic, like at the end of the day, you want the best person who will help push the company forward. And if they don't do that, then you shouldn't hire them. And if you're specifically singling out, oh, well, we need a quota, I need to hire 3 more women before I can meet my quota, that's just not a good way to do it. You're not helping them out because you may be setting them up for failure because they'll be in a position they may not be ready for.
Mm-hmm.
Or on the other hand, you could just be singling someone out still based off their gender, or still based off of another like focus.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree.
yeah. So what are your thoughts on the 50-50? Have you heard of that, by the
Yeah.
way? The 50-50
The first time
ratio?
I heard of it was, or and most noticeable was when I was working for a particular popular hardware chain,
Mm,
and or I should say home improvement, and it was the most noticeable when it came to paying attention to how each individual worked, and you could tell they were hired mainly so that chain could say, "Yeah, I hired an Arabic who is from overseas and speaks different languages, and or I hired multiple women that don't know anything about tools, but they're working the tool department." Like
mm,
it was so bluntly obvious, that it also kind of put a slander on each diverse group, because now you have people who are working in these departments that don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and someone who could have been in those departments, knowing what they're doing, they got discriminated against because they don't fit that billet.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't foresee that 50-50 balance being properly executed and working out right. So it is there, I don't know what the saying is, but it's kind of like, hey, look what I'm doing, but are you actually doing anything helpful?
I got you. I got you. No, that makes sense for sure because it's you're really just setting them up for failure
Mm-hmm.
because they're not ready for it, and then you're pushing them forward into something else, or you're hiring them solely based off of the color of their skin or their gender or their background. Like you're literally doing exactly what you're trying to prevent.
Yeah.
um, and that's kind of one of those big things. And this is, I think, really interesting for us specifically. Bless you.
Thank you.
And this is something really interesting for us specifically because, I'm Cuban. My mom was born in Cuba and then she moved here and I was the first of my family born here in the US. And you're, Puerto Rican and Nigerian, so you have your own background as well. Our children now, they also have like a more unique background, and we have two girls. So it's, like this is something that I think relates to families. It relates to, individuals themselves and how they can grow and how they can expand their knowledge and how they can actually be ready for the roles. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be the responsibility of a company to make sure that the nation is equal. Because it's not
Mm.
the company's fault for not training someone before they became part of the company. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, if someone chooses to go to school for an art degree, or if they choose to go to school for, whatever, and then they end up wanting a position or to work, and it doesn't match what they've gone to school for or their specific experience, but they might hit the metric, the diversity metric, you're just setting them up for failure. Like, you're not
Yep.
helping them.
Yep. You're not helping your company either. The only aspect that
Absolutely.
you're helping your company in is just fitting that legal metric, that legal requirement. That's it.
100%. And for everyone listening that doesn't understand what the 50-50 hiring is, basically what it means is, and what's been the most popular lately has been based off gender. So they want people to hire specifically half of their workforce needs to be men, and then half of the workforce needs to be women. And that is a metric that they view for success. So it's not how effective are they, it's not how qualified are they for the position. And don't get me wrong, it's not like they're completely ignoring all those things. If you do have a big enough talent pool, you can likely find the right candidate. So this isn't saying like that's not also happening, but that shouldn't be a metric for success.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a baseline to make sure that you are being equal. And then that's another conversation as well. What is the baseline? Right now, federally, they have diversity, equity, inclusion, standards, and companies have to follow those standards. So that would be the baseline from the federal standpoint. I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it's like 10 to 15% has to be within like a certain diversity group.
I don't know. I couldn't
Um,
tell you or not.
yeah, I'm not super sure on that either. I have to check. But in a nutshell, it's all just based down to, are they the best candidate for the role? Not for any other metric, not for any other, check boxes, but are they actually the best? And then you have this like a very funny kind of one of the things you brought up where you'll hire someone because they meet so many things, right? Like they're from a foreign nation and they also, are different gender, and they also have whatever else, but they meet like seven of the check boxes for the diversity, equity, inclusion, and then you move forward with that person even though they may not be the best. And that's, in my opinion, if the quality of the candidate matters more of who the candidate is. And that's why I really like blind recruiting. Have you heard of blind recruiting before?
I've only heard the name.
Okay. So blind recruiting is basically just using tools or using technology to remove as much bias as you can during the hiring process. So, for example, looking at someone's resume, not looking at the picture, not looking at things like that to like kind of see who they are exactly, not looking at maybe where they've lived before, but focusing just on the facts. And when you focus just on the facts, you can make an unbiased opinion, at least more unbiased than if you were looking at, the color of their skin and where they were born and, I'm saying, all these other things that may skew your opinion on the conversation.
Hmm.
So, and that's a pretty interesting topic. And like I said, and like we said previously, it's a very touchy subject, especially right now where it's such a big part of our nation as a culture that we're trying to overcome. The everything that comes up with the you know BLM and all of these groups that are pushing forward their own mindset of what they see an ideal group is, but we're all one people, right? Like the world, although it seems like we're all super spread apart and we're all completely different, like we're all one race, right? We're all humans at the end of the day. And viewing it like that, in my opinion, is how you are the most successful and how you can include the most people and how we can all work together from there.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Touching on the blind recruiting, um, I can see that working to a certain point. When you are initially gathering the facts, that I can see the blind recruiting working. Come time for interview though, and you're actually seeing the person, that I think that is where you no longer use blind recruiting. I think purposely no longer use blind recruiting, because you have to take in consideration how this person is upholding themselves. And when I mean when you should stop using blind recruiting, I don't mean pay attention to their skin tone. And if the person is white, you're going to assume something of their racial background might contribute to their work ethic. No, I mean their hygiene. Are they dressed for the job? Did they show up on time? Stuff like that. So, and I specify that because I understand some people take it quite literally, or some people break it down to the grain when it's unnecessary to do that. So just paying attention at the interview for appropriate um, factors in that person and what you see they then, not their gender and all this other stuff that it makes them who they are.
Hmm, I got you. And do you ever feel like there was a bias put on you
Yes.
based off your gender, based off of
Yes.
color of your
Yes.
skin, anything like that?
Yes. So my when I remember when I was looking for my first legal job on the books, and I say this not like I was doing anything
I
sketch,
was about to say
because
the
you
way you
remember
say that.
you and I, we used to do like cleaning, or I would do yards,
Hmm.
and that's just what I mean. Like I wasn't old enough to legally work,
Yeah.
but I still wanted the cash, so I would do odd jobs.
Hmm.
um, so when I was looking for my first legal job prior to McDonald's, I was going physically in person everywhere I could that had physical applications, and I would fill everything out. Well, at two locations, I noticed very one was very blunt about their discrimination.
Mm.
I walked in, I asked for an application at Dairy Queen, and the manager of that location straight up told me, she was like, I don't want to hire any kids. And she sent me on my way. So that was discrimination against my age.
Okay.
And I before I left, I did notice that everyone that was working that location was white, and all of her employees were teenagers. So while I took it straight as age discrimination, on my way out, I kind of thought it's a little coincidental that there's not a single person with a colored mix in
Mm.
that employment establishment. So that was one. The other one was Publix. And Publix does not do, or at the time, they did not do paper, nor did they do on your personal computers. You had to go in and apply on their kiosk
Yeah.
next to the
Oh,
customer
I
service
also
desk.
applied at Publix.
You did
Yeah.
too. So, and everyone who's gone to Publix knows that Publix hires like the best of the best. They're better than Target. And that was like the thing. Um, well, I noticed that the kiosk has a camera
Mhm.
on it, and I thought it was a little weird because if I'm filling out an application, like who's watching or recording me. So the first time I filled out their application, I thought nothing of it. I was in a t-shirt and jeans,
Mhm.
didn't get it. Working at McDonald's, I filled out Publix again because I didn't like working at McDonald's, and this time I wore something nicer and I got a call. So they're they're going based off of how you look, sure.
Mm.
Um, I just thought it was a little weird.
I, okay. I can certainly understand that, but I mean at the same time though, you're going there for a job. So being presentable would seem like one of
Yeah.
the minimum
I won't
requirements.
I won't lie. The first time I was filling it out, I was there originally shopping with the family. So I was like, "Oh, while I'm here, I'll just fill this
No,
out."
for sure. And that completely
Yeah.
makes
The
sense.
second time I had an agenda.
Mhm.
So it was my on me the second time, but it was something that I also noticed.
But I mean that's a positive though, right? Because that shows that it wasn't necessarily the color of your skin because like you said they have the camera. It
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily the fact that you're a woman, it's the fact that you weren't dressed to impress, right?
Yeah.
That you weren't and to be fair, like we would have open interviews, back at the casino, and the way that I would do the open interviews, you know that you're going there for an interview, or
Yeah.
you at least know that you're going there to talk to
I've seen
someone,
some of your candidates.
and the candidates were coming in buck wild. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Like
Like,
you already know what the event is for.
yeah,
It's literally a job fair.
exactly.
So what are you doing showing up with the drawers falling off your pants, like off your bum?
Yeah.
And there were some wild girls too. Oh my gosh. But yes, I do agree. Um, you know what you're going there for. You just to impress.
Well, but that is kind of a point as well. Does that get taken into account? Because maybe that's part of the socioeconomic side. Like why is it that you're telling them no, or why are you not considering them? Is it the fact that maybe they can't afford a suit or like slacks or something like that?
Then communicate that. I did. I did that with two of the jobs that I got in the past.
Mhm.
And I said, after my first check, I will be able to get nicer clothes for the position. Not an issue. I got the jobs
Yeah.
because during the interview, I had the best that I had in my closet. And I did express, once I get this position, and I didn't say if, I said, once I get this position, the first check that comes in, I will go get myself nicer clothes for the position.
Yeah.
Not an issue. Sometimes a lot of people think that if you have to communicate that, it's like shameful.
Yeah.
You need to. You need to show your boss you can, one, communicate, two, be dedicated, and three, be the face of the brand. Because that's what you're doing in a job. You're always the brand, but that's another subject. I guess it could tie into this. I don't know.
I mean, it kind of does. Your personal brand, your personal image, because that is separate, right? Like that's not necessarily a diversity, equity, inclusion issue. That's more of a how do you hold yourself? When if you're applying to a position and you know that position requires, a suit and tie or requires whatever. Like I applied to Men's Warehouse, right? This is one of my earlier
Oh my
positions.
gosh, I remember
I
this.
applied to Men's Warehouse. I had one suit that I
Mm-hmm.
had from years ago that I bought for something. I can't remember why, but I had like one outfit. And I went there and they picked my outfit apart, right?
I think
Still
this was
offered me the
your
position.
outfit that you proposed to me in.
Oh, I think so.
And yeah, and this guy really took apart everything that you were wearing.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, what's the average suit cost for one of our suits? And I was like, I don't know, like $150, $200. And he was like, nah, like the minimum is like 400. And I was like, all right, well, this definitely isn't 400. And he was like, oh, like this is however, like I guess in the back of the suit you have like a tail, and then my stuff was still connected together, and I guess you're supposed to cut it and separate them. I don't know. I don't
Wait,
really
we
wear a
don't
lot
do
of suits.
fashion.
Yeah, we don't. We've never really been big into the fashion industry, and we also never really had the funds to afford
Exactly.
to be big in the
I
fashion
mean, if you
industry.
had gotten the job, you would have definitely had the fashion for it.
Yeah, I
But
definitely would have. Well, they offered the position, but they were offering it lower than what I was able to get at the time, like what I was able to accept. And at that time, I wasn't like dying for the position. It was more of just like an additional
I think
kind
at
of
the
step.
time you were trying to transition out of what you had
Yeah. Well,
because
yeah,
you
I
were
was looking
working
for a
UPS, I
manager.
think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking to be like a higher level leader because I wanted to understand more of the business side. And at that point, it was like a cool ground operations. Like, you could do kind of the front end stuff, but also focusing on the back end is what I was the most interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like that, right? Like, but even then, they still offered me the position because I was able to interview well. I was able to communicate. I showed up lacking. I didn't have something that was very impressive, but they noticed that it was at least effort, right?
Yeah.
Like they noticed that, like, all right, maybe this guy wasn't able to afford a $400 suit, but he got what he got and he could show up.
And your best did come close to decent for their business. You went to a suit and tie store for men in a suit and tie.
Yeah,
Did you wear a tie? I think
I
you wore a
did wear a
tie.
tie. Yeah,
Yeah, you hate ties. I just couldn't remember.
I do hate ties. Yep.
Yep. But I mean, like that's a perfect example of how you should be interviewing
Yeah.
to avoid getting discriminated against. And that's another thing. A lot of people take that um, if they are not chosen for a position because of what they wear, and maybe they're lacking the funds to wear something nice, they are being discriminated against for the class of wealth that they're in.
Mm.
And I can't speak for all businesses because there are plenty that are guilty of actually doing that.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then there are some that are more cautious, like if you don't wear it now, how am I sure you're going to wear it later? But that's why it's important to communicate
Yeah.
that you're going to get it with what you need. I mean, some positions will even give you a per diem to go get something to start out with.
Yeah.
But
For sure. It definitely just depends on the position and the
you gotta
company
just
itself.
talk to your boss, your potential
Yeah.
boss. But I don't, bringing it back into the main topic, I also don't see it appropriate.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those, like I said, one of those touchy subjects. I remember we were hiring a manager at one of our our locations, and they were homeless actually during the interview process. And they interviewed well. They were dressed appropriately. They were clean. You know what I'm saying? Like they upkept themselves, even being homeless, and they also addressed that at the interview.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not the one that did the interview. Someone else did. They just told me about it, and then because they were going to be my team member, um, and went through it. They were selected. So even going through that hardship and going through that because they were able to interview well, because they were able to still, no matter their situation, they knew what they had to do. And although that team member didn't do as well as we would
Didn't
have
work out.
liked, yeah, the interview and getting selected, in my opinion, that is really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
If someone tells you, hey, I'm homeless, but I show up to work, I'll make sure that I get there, I dress, you know what I'm saying, like the way that I need to dress, I am clean and I can show up to the interview. Like there's people that aren't homeless that show up to the interview and they smell really, really bad. They have dirt all in their
I've
fingers.
seen it.
Yeah, and they're not, and they're dressed in a t-shirt and shorts. Like I understand that you may be struggling, but the way that you dress, the way you hold
The way you
yourself and
present
present
yourself.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that matters. In my opinion, that matters more than the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion side, because it doesn't matter what your background is. What matters is you think this is acceptable. If you think that is acceptable,
Mm-hmm.
you're not it. Like you're not ready for the position. And maybe that's a conversation. And I've actually coached some of the people that I've interviewed. Like during those open interviews, people will come and I'm like, do you have a resume? They said no. I'm like, okay, well, please fill out this information because we have a sheet to let people kind of write in their own stuff. And because a lot of people don't have a resume when they come in. And they'll come in wearing whatever, and I'm like, did you like was this a last minute thing, or did you know that we had open interviews? They were like, oh no, I knew about it. I had prepped ahead of time and this and that. And I was like, all right.
Girl came in with a halter top and a skirt so short that like if she farted it would go bad. It was very baffling.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot though, and in my opinion, it's not necessarily their fault because maybe they genuinely just don't know.
Like
You
they
know,
don't have the proper
yeah,
examples.
like no one, if no one tells you what you're supposed to wear in an interview, how are you going to know? Like, obviously, you can do your own research and things like that, but every company is different. You know, like I wouldn't wear a suit to every interview depending on the position, just like I wouldn't wear, I mean, to be fair, I would never wear a t shirt and shorts.
I wasn't necessarily told how to dress for my first interview. Like my parents did the best that they could, and my mom said you have to dress presentable. Well, my mindset of presentable was not necessarily of how my parents dressed, because at the time my mom didn't have um an office position like she did now, so she was constantly in very rundown clothes because
Mhm.
her job would wear her clothes out.
Yeah.
And then my dad would have a office uniform. So I only knew of office uniforms that had like the brand logos, everything that was given by the office.
Okay.
So my example that I went based off of was, how do my teachers look? Because
Mm.
my first job was in while I was in high school.
Yeah.
So I figured if I took examples of how the other females dressed at school during the business the formal days, because there were some casual days, then that would probably be the best bet. And it was. Even though it was McDonald's, I showed up in formal flats, slacks, black socks, collared shirt. Not a busy shirt either. And my dad was the one who actually helped me with that. He
Nice.
said, you don't want anything with patterns or bright colors. It's too busy.
Yeah.
And at the time of the interview, my interviewee said she was very appreciative of how I dressed. I dressed for the properly for the interview,
Mhm.
and I was the only one out of the other candidates that were there that was actually dressed for an interview.
Yeah.
One of them showed up in a skin tight prom dress, cut at the chest and like right below the buttocks. So it's, you could tell she tried because maybe she thought that was the formal attire she needed,
Mhm.
but it wasn't time and place correct.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Not everyone has those examples. Not everyone pays attention to what's around them either.
Yeah.
Like I use my teachers as a resource. A lot of people will say, "Well, I don't know how to dress." You watch TV, right? Take someone who's in an office as an example. I mean, there's so much we could do. And during our time in of technology, easily could have Googled it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, that's such a great point, though. And the problem is that people, if the recruiter or the manager, whoever it is that's speaking to these candidates, if they don't tell them, if they don't, not necessarily, you don't have to coach them, but if you don't at least tell them, like, we appreciate your time. I will say that, the way that you came dressed, typically we are looking for, and then you tell them what it is that you want them. Closed-toed shoes that aren't tennis shoes,
That's part of my
pants,
interview process.
slacks, whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
going through those steps with them will let them know that, you didn't not give them the position because of
Maybe
any
their
DEI.
qualifications or
Yeah,
something.
not because of any of those issues, but it was purely because of how they held themselves. And that's a really, really important thing that as an HR team member, like you got to think about all the different people
Yeah.
out there.
And you have to be careful if you're giving that feedback. I'll admit that as when I used to be a manager, I've never given um feedback regarding how someone presented themselves, because at the time I wasn't educated enough on how to tactfully tell them
Hmm.
the way you presented yourself was not it.
Yeah.
Um and the reason why I say that is because there's a lot you can get in trouble with.
Yeah.
So if if they don't ask, careful how you tell them. If they ask, still be careful. Let them know, the maybe the pants you were wearing or something like that. You got dirt on your face, like you didn't pay attention to the way you looked before walking out or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know. But I agree with that. Part of my interview process at the end, I do ask how they saw me hold my interview. Not everyone has answered.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I have had some feedback, and like just ask.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely get what you're saying, especially as far as like you don't want to say the wrong thing. I completely understand. What I would recommend, you can still help someone, right? So you can still help that candidate even if you're worried about that. The best way to do it is you write up a document, very simple, one pager, and you write all the things that they would need for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly would
Oh,
you
I
want
love
them to wear?
those.
So like
Yes.
for you would want a resume, you would want a collared shirt. It doesn't have to be a button up, but you know what I'm saying? Just put whatever the
Didn't
minimum
you have
is.
that when you interviewed with Amazon? Like they sent you
Yeah.
like something to pay attention to, like kind of notes or
Yeah,
something.
well, Amazon was crazy. They give you so much information if you're gonna be like selected for the
But I think
farther
that's
along process.
fantastic.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm saying have that sheet with you,
Mm-hmm.
and then if someone comes up, like obviously if you prep them ahead of time, I'm saying like for open interviews, like there's no communication. They just show up and then
Okay.
you start interviewing. But yeah, like that, sending them an email ahead of time, like, hey, you're gonna be coming up, which we did that before. We would send them a small mini map to show them exactly where they're going to meet. We would send them a reminder of the time, the information, the location. We would provide them the what they would need to bring. We would tell them roughly what we would want them to wear. Like, yeah, like you put all that information out there so that way, kind of the same point, everyone has an equal playing field. Everyone has the same information. So you can really go based off of the focus of are you the most qualified or not.
Mm.
But I'm saying like for the people that are open interviews that just walk in, have a sheet there ready. Like have a document, write it up. What I'm saying, it doesn't have to be super super formal. It can be literally just a one sheet document,
Oh,
but
I got you.
hand it to them like, "Hey,
Oh,
the next
Aldi's
time you
had something
interview."
like that
Oh,
because
I don't
I
have
did
them
an
now.
open interview with Aldi's, and they give you information prior to you sitting through the open interviews.
Hmm.
So they have like kind of like a gather time
Yeah.
prior to the every interview taking place. And they give you all the information that you would need to know about the open positions, the company policy, stuff like that.
Hmm.
They tell you, look this over and decide whether or not you want to sit in the interview.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic.
That is, yeah. Getting them fully ready before they step out. That's extremely, extremely important. And yeah, like at the end of the day, in human resources or even just a leader of an organization, you should be trying to help people, you know? And I completely understand not saying something the wrong way or being worried about that. But here's the thing, if you do the same thing for everyone, then you're covered. Like if you have one document that you can give to everyone or one template or one format or whatever, then you're covered. The problem lies if you're singling someone out. That's where there can be a little bit more of a conversation of misconduct or questioning. But if you're coaching someone, if you're helping them, you know, and you do the same thing for every person and you can back yourself with like documentation and reasoning and you follow the legislation, you're covered, then you're good. And all you did at the end of the day was help someone better prepare for the next time. But what you can do if someone has a bad interview with me or if they're not dressed ready, I give them the sheet. I tell them, I would like to see you next week. Please make sure that you follow the information on this sheet and we could have a second interview. I'll give you another chance because, maybe you didn't know. But if you come a second time and you don't follow the information on the sheet, then I know that you're not right.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter
You had the
about,
chance.
yeah, absolutely. And then the DEI isn't a question because that wasn't even somewhat of a concern. It was purely you're not holding yourself to the standard of our organization. And I'm
I
sorry, but I
agree.
appreciate
Because you were given the chance. And I know a lot of people are probably going to, they get upset about everything.
it.
Um, Someone probably is going to hear this and they're like, well, you don't know what I'm going through in life. And this is what's going on. And I don't know if I have the time. If you don't have the time to look over resources that someone openly gave you, they are essentially handing you the key.
Hmm?
You don't want it.
Now tell them, Beck. Tell them that their feelings don't matter. Go ahead. Let them know. Say it.
We're getting there.
You know it's true.
Listen. You keep filling that cup. We're getting there.
Yep.
But yeah, no. You literally have the opportunities to help yourself, be involved, and get where you want to go. And if you decide not to take it because X, Y, and Z just so happens to be more important, then you're not trying to help yourself. Stop wasting other people's time. But we're gonna go back to the main topic. So I don't want to go on a tangent about how people don't help themselves to let other people help them help,
Yeah.
just help me to help you. But anyway, the whole 50-50. Um I understand the purpose of it, and or I should say I understand the original purpose of it.
Yeah.
The the intentions were there, like they were good,
Yeah.
but now they are skewed
Mm.
because there are so many businesses just trying to check the billet off to make themselves look good, and then like you said, you've got people setting themselves up for failure. I mean, every now and then you get someone that got in because of that,
Yeah.
and they are amazing. They really are. But a lot of them, they're not meant to be in that field. And a lot of the times they don't even know what they want.
Yeah.
So they just apply to random jobs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of sucks for the person who's waiting to get in.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Occupying that seat. I did let go of when you remember I used to work for CVS from home,
Hmm.
and I was sick when um working from home for like after like 2 months of being in the job or something like that. I can't remember. I got COVID. How the hell did I get COVID from working from home? And I was hardly ever out of the house when I started that job.
Yeah.
We all got it, but it kicked me down so bad. You remember I couldn't breathe.
Hmm.
So I had sent the email. I don't know when I'm gonna get better because we're moving on to week 3 of still with COVID.
Yeah.
And I let my boss at the time know, like, I'm relinquishing my position. Someone else deserves the seat. I had no idea when I was going to get better.
Yeah.
So it just made sense. And then we were moving too. So it made things very complicated
Yeah.
because we were moving up here to St. Louis.
Hmm.
So it's just, I think it's also a matter of not just the businesses are not, should not be responsible for this whole, what is it called?
DEI,
D,
diversity,
D,
equity, and inclusion.
DEI. I'm not good with acronyms,
You're good.
but I don't think businesses should be responsible for the DEI. I think that the country itself has a responsibility to set a proper standard, but it's also a personal responsibility to each individual to own up whether or not they fit the billet.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. And I'm not saying degrade yourself. Find your outlet. Stick to that. Make yourself great in that.
Hmm.
But don't be mediocre in something else where someone could be great in.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely get that. And I really liked what you were saying as far as getting put in a position and the nation being responsible, and because it's true at the end of the day, like a company, a startup, whatever, they can't help everyone. At the end of the day, that's just not how it is. I do think that having a minimum standard is important,
Mm-hmm.
like the 25% or whatever, because you do want to have a little bit of force, because if you're not kicking some of these companies in the butt, like, we've seen it, like some companies are just not good,
Yeah.
like they're just not doing good, they're not following DEI, and this isn't necessarily in relation, like our conversations is in relation to the ones that are doing poorly. We're trying to help and kind of talk to the ones that are doing okay, and letting them know, like, it's okay to not focus so much
Mm-hmm.
on the DEI and instead focusing on the position itself.
Oh, I had a question. I just remembered.
Okay, go ahead.
You finish up first.
All right. And one of the really, really big things is that, like I said, the reason why this all started was absolutely a solid, good reason, right? I mean, there's a lot of positions that, and especially in higher level positions, where you have the same old white guy who's been in that position forever and he hasn't died yet. And so someone else can't take over. And so when you look at it like that, like, yeah, we want more diversity. We want to allow more people to have more opportunities to get higher up. I 100% agree with that sentiment. I
Hmm.
just want to make sure that we're setting people up for success the whole time and not making that the only metric for
We need
success.
to stay consecutive.
Yeah.
The question I had for the DEI,
Hmm.
DEI, how does this affect those businesses that are so focusing on um, particular groups? So, with the BLM going on, it really sparked a lot of businesses starting back up and helping out their communities. But a lot of them make it known we are solely focusing on hiring and employing Black personnel.
Hmm.
And it's not just the Black community, it's a lot of communities. So how does the DEI come into factor when it comes to um, workplaces like that will clearly discriminate against other races, or if we're looking at man-run organizations or women organizations that will discriminate sexes and stuff like that?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, that's kind of a hard question, mainly because it's really subjective. It really is kind of case by case basis. In general, there isn't a lot of oversight for those kinds of situations, and you kind of think of like a family owned business, right? You have one generation and then they have their next generation helping them and they hire people, and then with that you kind of think of like, at least for me, I think of like restaurants, right? Because that's kind of the easiest way, because cuisine is so focused on individuals. You've got your Mexican, your Thai, your like your Chinese food, like you've got all these different groups, and they focus on hiring that specific culture because it may be the easiest to
Mm-hmm.
integrate them, or it may focus, but that's more of a
Oh,
focus on culture and potentially not necessarily a focus on DEI. Like, let's say if you had a white guy who lived in Mexico for 5 years, spoke Spanish, knew how to make Spanish food, maybe he'd be a good candidate. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, that actually just reminded me. I forgot that I didn't get even to apply for a restaurant. I Jalisco
Oh,
back,
yeah.
yeah, back in Florida because I couldn't speak Spanish.
Exactly. And that's a skill, right? Like
Hmm.
speaking Spanish is a skill. So although you are Puerto Rican, so culture, or I guess, race wise or ethnicity wise, you would be possibly higher up on the spectrum of hiring for that reason if they focused on, DEI like that,
Hmm.
which would be a problem. But you didn't have a skill, which is
Yeah.
speaking Spanish.
Yep.
And that is something that you would be okay, like, as in, like, they are safe. Like, if they can say I didn't hire you because you can't do XYZ skill, that is okay. And that's kind of like, it's a really really interesting conversation because it's just so.
It's like where does it stop?
Yeah.
Yes. And I know that there's going to be a lot of controversy probably with this podcast because many people are going to put up their defense.
Mm,
And you got to really look at it. Are you sure that you are of within your limits of DEI? Is it actually working out? Are you being just straight up discriminated? Are you discriminating?
mhm.
And um religion comes in heavy in this country.
Mm,
And when it comes to DEI, if I was to go apply at a temple, I wouldn't get it
yeah.
because I'm not within the faction.
Mm.
I'm not following the faction. So immediately that's discrimination. But it's like, are they within the rights or are they violating DEI? Should DEI even be put into place?
That's actually a really really interesting question. I mean, there's even like religious organizations that do something different, like a hospital, but that hospital might
That's
be like
true.
a
I couldn't
Christian or
give birth
Catholic
at the one
hospital.
hospital because I didn't want
You wanted an additional surgery that
I
they wouldn't.
yes, thank
Yeah.
you. then because of the Catholicism, that was a Catholicism based uh, hospital, they then denied my surgery date, my whole birth date. I forget.
Hmm.
I'm drawing a blank, but and I had to go to a different hospital to deliver our second born,
Yep.
and it's it's very interesting to see that play out even in the health system.
Mm.
Or when I used to watch Grey's Anatomy, there were quite a bit of doctors that were against many decisions from their parents. So I'm not sure if my mic just turned off, but the, there was, because of religious belief, cultural beliefs, it plays a heavy role in some of the day-to-day decisions, including first responders.
Yeah. But I mean, bringing it, yeah, so 100%, but focusing more with the DEI with that relation, if you apply to a position at a religious institution like that, and then you met every single qualification, they allowed you to interview, you went through the full interview process, and you still didn't get the position, then it begs the question, well, did I not get it because there was just a candidate that was better than me? Or did I not get it because maybe my religious or my views are different from the organization? Which is in itself a really, really interesting question. But it kind of just, it really just depends. Like I said, it's really, really case by case. I would say that typically you're not allowed to ask. I mean, not, I would like to say, but in general, you're not allowed to ask about religion, like religious preferences during the interview process. That's a big, big no no when it comes to HR and recruiting.
What about disability?
For disability, you can find out beforehand if they choose to let you know, but you shouldn't be asking the question.
It's on a lot of applications, but there is
Yeah,
an option saying I choose not to disclose,
correct. And then,
which is a lot of people interpret as yes, you have a disability.
well, then during the interview process, like let's say you are interviewing someone who is disabled, you can't ask them, are you disabled? But you can ask them, for this position, the minimum requirement is being able to be on your feet for 5 hours and pick up 30 pounds or 50 pounds of weight by yourself. Can you do that?
Hmm.
And then if they say no, then you're like, all right, thank you very much for the interview, but we do apologize. That is a necessary requirement for the position. Or if they say yes with, moderate accommodations, then you have to make the consideration of if you want and if you need to use those accommodations, or if it would be better to just find someone else. Like I said, it's all really, really gray. I mean, that's the really interesting thing about HR and building the culture and the recruiting aspect is a lot of it is kind of a gray space.
Yes.
There are some things that are just hard, hard no's.
And I think a lot of people will spitefully test their limits.
Mm,
And the reason why I say this is because while I was working at Lowe's, we had a potential candidate that was supposed to interview to work in the back with us
mm,
in receiving. Part Almost all of the job, was heavy lifting and machine operating. I worked 4 different machines, I believe, and unloading semi trucks.
mm,
This person was in a wheelchair, and they applied as
mm.
receiving personnel.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anything that they could do back there
Yeah.
because when it came time to the paperwork, that was for the next crew to do. Everything was physical,
Yeah.
and they were permanently disabled. So they, like, where are you gonna go?
Mm,
I understand. Maybe you're just looking for a position, and they were offered a different position in the store because their personality was good.
yeah.
So they were offered a different position, an even higher paying position at that.
Mm.
Denied that, and then sued, filed a suit.
Oh,
So in
interesting.
my opinion, that was spite.
Yeah.
That was like, let's see how far I can get with this.
Nah, I wouldn't even say spite. I would say that was a tactical consideration.
Yeah, I don't
I
know if they
wouldn't,
got
yeah.
anything out of it,
I mean,
but
yeah, but I wouldn't even say spite because if they applied, were offered a position that met their criteria, met their standards, and was increased pay, there's no reason.
you were given so many open options just to take.
Yeah,
It was for the taking.
there's no reason. You definitely went out of your way to set that up. But that's That's a big
That's
issue, right?
exploiting the new laws.
Yeah, but that is a big, big thing when it comes to working nowadays, and being an HR department is it's so gray. It's so gray. Like, but that's one of the reasons why having a paper trail, making sure that you're treating everyone the same. And by that I mean making sure the interview process, the interview questions, like things like that is all the same across the board. Like you can ask maybe a few extra questions based off of the information that they've given you. Like if you want more information, absolutely. You should be doing follow-ups with your questions, but having a baseline of what you should ask, how to ask it, what time frame, and the full talent acquisition process going in a specific order every time, that will save you, certain lawsuits and things like
Yeah,
that.
but expect to be sued.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're
Alex
doing
Hormozy
well,
said it. He was like, every great business is going to get sued at some point.
yeah, if you're doing well, expect to get sued.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I mean I really, really like discussions like this though, because it's
I like
really,
controversial
yeah,
discussions.
I mean
Yeah.
I just find them super, super interesting, especially when it's gray. Because when it's gray, you have a little bit more openness to having a conversation, and you have a little more openness and like, well, what are your thoughts? And then let me tell you my thoughts, and let's see if we can maybe meet in the middle, or let's
And
see,
that's one of the most hardest things right now.
it's so
We
difficult.
have a country that is battling itself.
Yeah.
And there are so many people that are on one side or the other and they're not meeting in between. Um, they can't accept that someone disagrees with them and respect it their opinion. And it's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough. I think that's why people think we're weird. You and I. Like
Probably.
we're told constantly like I don't get you, man, or you're weird or whatever because they
Yeah.
don't want to hear us.
Mhm.
Um and I will tell people when I'm talking to them like, "Hey, I disagree with you, but that's okay. I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
I respect your opinion, and we don't have to agree on it. And it's nothing detrimental. Like if you tell me that dumping puppies in the river is okay, I'm gonna disagree with you. And if you tell me no, it's fine, then I'm probably gonna get mad at you because that's understandable, right? I would suspect that's understandable. But if you tell me that what is it, DEI?
Mhm.
DEI is 100% accurate. It is flawless. I'm gonna disagree with you. You disagree with me. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, yeah, when it comes down to it, the idea of it, 100%. The idea of opening space to allow different cultures, different backgrounds in, I love it. And that, in my opinion, should be pushed forward.
Yeah.
But the way that you do it, that is the topic that is a little bit more controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
All
think
right.
next time, let's lay out the carpet for our next discussion.
Okay, let's hear it.
I would love for us to cover appropriate topics in the workplace.
Appropriate topics. Oh, like what you can and can't talk about?
Yes, the
That's
whole taboo subjects of religion, politics, racial, the differences.
mm,
Do you
money,
remember?
pay.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I would love to discuss those. You remember a lot of jobs that we had, they had it in their handbooks that we weren't allowed to discuss them,
Yeah.
any of those topics, because they would cause fights
Yeah. I definitely think that we'll probably have some controversial opinions with each other.
all the time.
Yeah, next time.
All the time.
Because I'm sure that we're going to be on kind of different viewpoints for some
I
of those
think feelings
conversations.
matter. You don't think feelings matter? It's okay.
Don't worry, you'll
I
you'll learn
do
feelings
agree
don't
that
matter.
the mindset makes the difference.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes, we gotta get you some merch.
Some merch? No, I'm good.
Feelings don't matter. Sponsored by OmniHR.
That would be pretty interesting. All right, well, if you stuck with us this long, I truly appreciate it. And if you like the content, please rate the show. If you're feeling a little crazy, maybe share it with someone.